Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed, unedited look into my workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, designer, animator, and your friend. And I'm excited, as always, to get into another episode this week and to make some cool, one-of-a-kind original artwork right here, right now, over the course of the next hour or two. So thanks for tuning in. Episode 52, that makes it a year. Now, technically, I didn't start the practice as a strict, weekly show. I didn't air it at the same time every Tuesday. So, we're not exactly a year, but we're 52 episodes in, and for all intents and purposes, we're about a year strong, right? We've done about 30 episodes in the current format. We broke episode 50 recently, which had an enormous response. So thank you very much for tuning into that. We're just ever so close to the 1,000 subscriber mark. I have a feeling that after this episode we'll be north of 900, and if by the end of the week we could break 1,000, that would be just absolutely insane. So thanks for tuning in again this week. Changing it up a little bit, we've been doing a lot of landscapes, a lot of isometric views recently, which is really cool. I've been enjoying those a lot, but I think we're gonna flip it a little bit this week. I've got a sketch that I'm really digging, and it's definitely not isometric. It's sort of the opposite of that. It's going to be like kind of a front-on view. Actually, and as I'm gabbing here, maybe I'll show you the sketch. It's the one on this top page here, right? So just as we do a series of simple geometric forms. But they're put together. They're composed in a way that I think is nicer than just any one of them on their own. And instead of doing that isometric view, we're going to do pretty much a head-on shot and kind of have one central band of interest around the center of the composition. So all that and more over the course of the next hour or two in this show. As I always say, these episodes are best when folks are in the chat saying what's up, asking questions, sharing what they're working on. If you have something cool that you've been working on that you want some more eyes on, you want some feedback on, a little bit of critique, drop a link in the comments. We'll open it up a little bit later while stuff's rendering out. So let's dig in with all of that said. Let's get a floor going. And as you've probably seen, if you're a repeat viewer of the guest, we start a lot of the times with just a simple landscape object as the floor. There's nothing wrong with just a normal plane as the floor, but I like to inject a little roughness, a little bit of interest. If we're doing an outdoor scene, that's what we're dealing with pretty much, is a realistic-ish ground, right? Also, since we're dealing with such a centered, simple composition, I'm going to add a camera and just zero it out real quick. That's kind of funny. Maybe it's just the angle of the landscape. There we go. Draw it up a little bit. Right. Good start, good start. Let's save this thing. Oh gosh, look at this. I didn't even make my folder. Normally I make my folder before Mobile Colony. Flying about the seat of my pants. 2. All right, there we go. And so I'm going to use just a handful of really simple shapes here in creating this composition. And now, it's really just going to be about, it's not going to be a fancy modeling exercise at all. in this tutorial. I think what we're going to be dealing with is a compositional exercise, how to take just a handful of simple shapes and arrange them in a way that looks really, really good. And that's what's great about sketching, is it's a lot faster to get your ideas down on paper than it is in cinema, unless you're a wizard. I think, as 3D artists, we tend to really want to think about, crazy modeling techniques. We want to think about lighting and rendering and injecting tons and tons of little details and stuff like that. And all of that's cool. There's a lot of really beautiful work that gets done in that style. But it's also really fascinating, to me at least, to see there's some illustrators out there, some artists who get incredible work accomplished with really rather simple techniques, and in terms of their form language, fairly simple pared down stuff. So a lot of what I do as a 3D illustrator is to try and lend some of that simplification, some of that that paring down to the 3D world. Let's see if we can make that happen today. Whoops. So we're just slowly building up the shapes, getting the basics of the composition going here. And then, of course, we'll add lighting and we'll add little windows and doors and texture. And other little bits that are going to add interest, make this thing look awesome. First things first, right? First we gotta get our composition right. And when I talk about composition, a big part of that is rhythm. And it sounds kind of silly to say rhythm because you think of that as really like a musical component. But there are rhythms in all sorts of things. There's rhythms in the way people speak. There's rhythms in the way that traffic moves. These different cadences apply to all different parts of our lives. And in a piece like this, I think something like rhythm becomes super apparent. If you think about almost, moving left to right, which is the way that Westerners read, and typically the way our eyes move, is top left corner down to bottom right corner. So a lot of our rhythm is going to happen centrally in this piece, right? And if you can imagine moving from one side to the other and how your eye will go up and down and intersect with these different forms, you can imagine that there's a rhythm that takes place, right? Imagine this almost like, an equalizer, like a beat moving along, right? You see there's different shapes and different sizes and different heights that are going to control and affect the way your eye moves across the piece, right? And that's sort of like rhythm. I'll give you an example, right? We just go like this, right? I mean, there you go. That's a rhythm, right? But if this rhythm were a song, it'd be a boring ass song, right? It would just go doot 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 doot. It'd be super boring. It's like a metronome, right? That's the metronome of rhythms. Boring. Right, but now here we're starting to look at an interesting composition. We've got some movement, we've got different shapes and sizes. Soon we'll get into textures and colors, and all that is like timbre and vocals and the tone and melody. So there's a lot of things we can work with here to affect the way the piece looks. And there's really cool songs that are done with, rather simple instrumentation. But if the instrumentation is going to be simple, and I guess read into that as form language in this particular piece, if the instrumentation is going to be simple, then other parts need to carry your interest. Maybe that's the timbre, maybe that's just, the ability of the acoustic guitarist to play really well or really quickly. Maybe the vocals have a super interesting sound to them. I don't know. I'm not a musician, so perhaps my music metaphors are growing a little thin here, and perhaps some actual musicians can correct me in the comments. But there's sort of a brief overview in the way that I think about rhythm and movement and cadence and how that applies to visual artworks as well as sound as well as music, where we typically think about it. Hey Arbor, thanks for tuning in. So Sketch and Tune is really, really powerful. I've used it a handful of times. It's not part of my typical workflow, but it's a powerful tool and something I'd like to use more of. I know EJ Hassenfratz at iDesign has a lot of great resources that talks about cell shading and Sketch and Tune. He uses that really well to use sort of the animation power of Cinema 4D to generate more 2D, vector-looking shapes and visuals, which is a really cool workflow, and seems like just a terrific guy. So I'll definitely check out his work, his tutorials, if you want to learn more about Sketch and Tune. It's not something I've covered on this show a whole ton, but it's admittedly a very powerful tool and something I've used a little bit in the past, but I'm no expert. Maybe I should do a show on that sometime. Maybe we should explore Sketch and Tune a little bit further on the practice. I do try and, when I do this show, I do try to mostly focus on techniques that I'm comfortable with, that I'm well versed in, so that way I'm not spending the majority of the show trying to figure stuff out. I've gotten into that situation a couple of times, and we've pulled through it for the most part. There's usually more than one way to skin a cat, but I hate to spend an hour and a half of this show not really being productive, just fumbling my way through techniques that I don't know well. So maybe what I should do then is learn a little bit about Sketch and Tune, get a little bit better with it, and then I can present it to you guys in a way that's hopefully a value add. So look at that. So we've been at it for about 15 minutes. Just moving these pieces around. We've sort of got an interesting composition going already. Got some points towards the middle, which are a little bit higher. which look good. We've mixed in a few of these sort of thinner bits, which helps break up the look a little bit and add some interest to that rhythm I was talking about. I feel like it sort of crescendos nicely here and tapers off. Although I think I want a little bit more of a focal point in the center here. There's lots of time to add little details and doodads. We're going to be finessing this stuff a lot as we move through the episode. Actually, what this kind of reminds me of, some of these shapes, which I happen to use a lot, are similar to the shapes that I just used in a music video that I put out last week. So please check that out. You'll find it in my channel. I teamed up with a really awesome musician and producer who goes by Slacker. You should check out his channel too. He does all these really cool synth recordings and uploads himself playing some dope stuff, really. And I was so taken aback by his work that I contacted him and asked if I could use one of his tracks to create an animation to, and he kindly allowed me to. So it's for his piece called Mr. Television. So that'll be in my YouTube channel. So please check that out. I think you'll enjoy it. What's cool about that is I actually used the sound effector, which is a super powerful piece of super powerful tool you'll find in cinema that allows you to alter the placement, scale, rotation of things based on the volume of a track. And so the sound effector allowed me to move bits of my model based on different instrumentation in the Slacker track. And what was cool is he sent me the song, but broken into several MP3s according to different tracks or samples or stems that he had in his piece. I was able to map those to different parts of the landscape. So like the clouds moved with the keyboards, as I recall, the mountains moved with the drums, and all the trees and weird stuff in the landscape moved according to the vocals and different other bits of instrumentation. And then the whole video is actually just one long shot of one long model of just a single camera pass that moved across this whole sort of fictional landscape. I was pretty happy with how it came out. All right, so let's get some simple lighting into the piece. I'm just going to go right to physical because I dig the way that works 9 times out of 10. Let's go 1920, 1080 because that's a nice round HD number. Then this has become sort of almost a crutch of late. I love this physical sky. It allows me to really quickly get a point light, like an infinite light that'll cast shadows, and a nice fill light. Works great, renders quickly, built right into the software. Throw ambient occlusion on now. I usually wait a little while to throw global illumination on, GI. And in the meantime, what I like to do is go to the sun, which is like our fill light, which is kind of like how GI acts, kind of. I can just turn the intensity up a little bit. Oop, that's the sun. I want to go to the sky. Turn that intensity up, maybe 20%. See, that's going to give us a little bit more fill, a little less dark in the shadows. And I say that, of course, after having turned ambient occlusion on, so you'll see we'll get more realistic contact shadows in areas like this. See that contact shadow? But you can see the dark areas have a little bit more fill light in them, which looks good. That's already looking like a nice friendly mound of things. I'm going to affect the time, so it's a little bit earlier in the day. We get a little bit more overhead lighting. There we go. Chat room's sort of quiet today. Wonder if we're having those issues like we've had in the past. Let's see if the YouTube chat's working. If not, it could just be that everyone's quiet, and that's fine too. Look at this wise ass. Did Mexico pay for it? What are we doing here? Let's go to my channel. Let's see. Gosh, what's going on? 896. See what I was talking about? We're so close. So close. Where's the live streaming thing? Here. Nope. Only one comment so far. Okay, cool. I'm going to add a little bit of interest in sort of a cheating, simple kind of way to the ground. I'm making a copy of it, rotating it, dropping it down a little bit. I'm going to add a different color to that. I'm also going to make fewer subdivisions here. So I think that's overkill, and it's going to help our render time. Lessen that a bit. Let's do this. Whoops. Whoops. There we go. All right. I think what I'll start doing now is adding, oops, I keep changing this camera angle. So first, let's add a protection tag. This HUD thing is driving me nuts. So I always go to details and untack, show location HUD in this physical sky, so we don't have that big green thing in the middle, which helps me see the composition a little more clearly. So I'm going to start adding, I guess, some little doors, some little doorways here. I'll throw this in a bool, or a boolie, depending how you pronounce it. Since everything's round, I'm going to keep it in that round form language. Just use cylinder for this opening. Ah, look at that nice little opening. am I thinking for this is almost like a little city, like a little colony, perhaps, like where the Fraggles live. And so a colony like this is going to need some windows and some doors, probably some chimneys. In fact, I'm going to make sort of a chimney shape now. All right, feeling it. Let's start adding a little bit of some different colors in here. Still keeping it in the same family. Just keep breaking it up. Just keep breaking up these forms. I just adjusted those dots and the noise back a little bit. I think they're a little strong, a little too large. Hello, Ilcia. Hello, Ilcia. Sorry, I don't know what you said. Thanks for tuning in, though. I'm wondering now if a little bit of hillsides in the back behind this is going to help or hurt. I feel like it looks pretty good, actually. Just a hint, though, not too much, I think. What I'm going to do is use some atmospheric perspective to push those guys a little further back. As things further away appear lighter and more blue. So if I make these mountains in the back a lighter blue color, they're going to appear further away. I don't know. I'll leave them for now. Not 100% sold on that move, to be honest. I love adding stripes to things. Stripes, again, it's talking about rhythm like I was earlier in the episode. Think about the inherent rhythm of stripes. They have a cadence, a repetition to them, which I find really interesting. They can do a lot for a composition, I've found. So I think now we should really be adding some more windows, some little bits of detail. So a couple more doors. Start making these feel a little bit more like buildings, I think. All right, so this guy should probably get one. Just throw him in a pool. I like to just hold Option while I'm adding new objects, so that'll add it like directly centered on that object. Now, if I want to center this cylinder on the object like a door, it's a great way to do it just by holding Option, and it adds it pretty much exactly where you need it, or dead center, which could be where you need it, or just a few short moves away from where you need it. And then I can do the same thing. I can hold Option with this cylinder selected, add a torus to it, take that out of the bool, and all of a sudden I can just shrink that down. I've got a torus almost exactly where I need it, right? Pretty handy. Pretty handy. All right. There's another cool doorway. Maybe this guy should be just a hair smaller. Maybe over here we make this guy a hair bigger. I think the windows I'm going to make are going to be essentially faux windows. I'm not really going to punch them out. I think I'll just sort of make a window shape. Oops. All right, so I'll add a little bit of specularity to these windows just to give it a bit of shine. Make it appear a little bit more window-like. Let's see how that works out. Now we get to add windows to buildings, which will take a minute. But I enjoy it. Weird. Another one of my favorite shortcuts, which you see me using a lot, which I don't always mention, is the highlight selected, which is just, you can use it by just pressing S on your keyboard. And so here, for example, if I select that and hit S, it'll just bring my viewport to that object. So I can go, hit S, just select this window, hit S, it'll bring me over there. I know I want to go over here, so I'll hit S. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll be in my camera view and know generally where I want to go. So select this guy, undo my camera view and hit S, and it'll bring me right to it. Super useful workflow hack. And I used to really carefully name most of my items, but I found that I can get away with slightly sloppier naming conventions if I can just select and highlight. Because usually what I'd use those for would be finding my stuff, right? Finding my objects. But pretty useful to be able to just zip around the view based on selections only. So that's where I'm at these days. Now, adding these buildings is making them, or adding these windows is making them feel a lot more like buildings, I'd say. So let's see how those look so far. Pretty good, actually. All right, I think I'm going to bite the bullet and add ambient occlusion at this point. Or sorry, global illumination. So I want to see how these things are going to be lit in our final pass. You're going to notice much higher quality lighting. That looks a lot nicer. You can see the shadows are not as severe because light is bouncing around the scene in a much more realistic way. And that guy's floating. You can see a lot more of the details. Everything's looking a little bit more realistic. It can be really hard to grab some of the handles that you need, especially in a straight on view. Almost got it. There it is. Can you see I've added in a new, much darker color here too. So I think we need a bit more contrast. Everything's feeling a bit sort of one note, a bit too much of the same color. Some more variety, a bit more contrast. Oops. Hey, what's up, Chris? Mr. Freud, thanks for swinging by. I'm assuming those are emojis. I can't read them in this particular chat client. Hey, Eric. Of the hills and Mario games, yeah, especially with the stripes, right? And I do, even though I'm not a big gamer anymore, I do draw a lot of inspiration from video games that I played in my youth. Big time. Huh. Yeah, I do, Chris. I do tend to um, lean on that same style of lighting a lot. Maybe I should try an evening piece. You know what I could even do is, let's try this. Make a copy of this and say daytime and turn it off. And then I'm going to go push this way into nighttime. Yeah, let's see. It's that hour. Look how much slower it's going. Interesting. No light. It's too late, I guess. No, I could also do. Let's just throw a luminance on this window texture. Still no light bouncing around the scene. Let's make it 720. Try this again. And now we're at least going to have the luminance from these windows, if that does anything for us. No need to pander. That's funny. Well, you got me curious too. I'm not necessarily pandering. I'm a little bit curious. And again, the practice, right? We should be pushing ourselves and not always just, digging that route trench those ruts in the road that we like to follow, digging those even deeper and getting more and more ingrained in the way we like to do things. So here we got a little bit of light happening from the sky. Looks very dark out, obviously. I'm going to turn this luminance up a little bit further. We're getting a little glow from these windows. What do you think? Doesn't give us as much of a range. You can see the blue in those shadows that I added from the sun, which is kind of neat. Let's see if we can push it even a little later. It's saying June 2017. Around here, it's light till like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Who knows how realistically it pulls from? Also, doesn't it depends on which city you're pulling from. It's really cool, actually. One of the neat features of this physical sky is you can come in here, and I can pick. Well, let's even try it. USA. Is San Francisco on here? Yep, it is. Let's try San Francisco, and you can do now too. You do today and now, and it'll give you somewhat accurate lighting. San Francisco at 8:30. See what that gets us. This is kind of cool. It'd be really neat. What I bet you could do is you could probably animate the time here just by keyframing this and run it through the day and get sort of a time lapse effect. Go from light to dark and watch the shadows move across and get longer. Yeah, specifically the underwater stuff. I mean, it's a really cool idea, and we could probably fake the effect with the right colors and lighting techniques, or even faking the effects with textures to a certain extent. But you mentioned caustics, I think, last week, which would give us a really realistic and beautiful sort of light penetrating the water kind of a look, and you get on the seafloor that amazing texture that happens from light passing through the waves, and that creates sort of a lens effect and gives you the caustics on the bottom of the floor. That in particular is very resource intensive when it comes to rendering. Increasing the intensity on the sky, yes, it would add more ambient light. Exactly. So that's kind of neat, right? I mean, you can even see, I'm going to delete these ones. You can see like daytime, evening, night, right? Now this is going to be pretty much daytime because I got that set till 5 o'clock in San Francisco today. The days are quite long. San Francisco is fairly west in our time zone, so we have the benefit of really long days this time of year. This is pretty cool. I really should do an evening scene one of these days. This is fun to experiment with because, it came together pretty quickly today. The composition's fairly, well, the composition's not that simple. The shapes used in the composition is fairly simple, so I was able to put this together pretty quickly. Maybe we'll play with more evening time kind of a look. See what that gives us. I'm sorry. I'm going back to the original camera. This has been a cool, or the original lighting. This has been a super cool exercise, obviously, and it's yielded some nice results. I'm going to stick with my daytime look for this. Let's drop that. Let's kill the luminance. I'll tell you, one of these days I'm going to have to try animating this clock right here and seeing if we can't get a nice time lapse throughout the day kind of effect. It would also be cool too then if we could animate some clouds moving overhead. I think these shadows could be a bit more interesting. I think I'm just gonna grab this sky and just rotate it a little bit further. Should give us, let's just point the shadows a little bit more towards the camera. Which is nice. All right, a little bit of smoky action. Let's see how this goes. Clouds are a nightmare. Yeah, clouds can be tough. Yeah, this style allows me to use really simple forms to create my shapes. And I don't know if you caught the beginning of the episode, but I was talking about the idea of like, there's lots of different illustrative styles, like lots of really successful, really amazing illustrators who do incredible work that use really simple forms and limited color palettes, and there within the artistic world there's this ability to really make minimal, beautiful, really kind of minimal stuff. And I feel like as 3D artists, a lot of the times we get wrapped up in the idea of reflections and crazy lighting techniques and cloner objects, making a million versions of something. And, I think it's okay to be a little more reductive, a little bit more minimal. So that's not bad, actually. I'm liking that. I wish the shadows were a little less apparent. So I'm going to make it a little more see-through. Going to make it a little bluer. Let's try that. Well, and in terms of it being easier, yes and no, right? So the modeling portion I think would be easier, but when and we're talking about like simplified illustrative styles, like when illustrators use reductive techniques, then it puts the onus on the fewer items that are there all need to be better looking, right? Because if there's not if there's not a lot of busyness and complexity to draw interest and keep the viewer occupied, then each of the few elements that are there need to be of a higher quality, right? Does that make sense? So while reductive simple things can look easy or simple to make, sometimes it's more difficult actually to create something minimal than it is to create something rich and complex, right? Because you have to know which elements to keep, which to improve upon, which need to stay. There's a whole variety of things that could happen there. We're getting there. We're really getting there. I'm gonna try something. Um, display. Let's see. It's not it. Use the compositing tag. I'm going to turn off shadowing on these bubbles. Let's see what that gets us. Because while I like them, I'm not sure if I'm loving these dark areas. It might be nicer if they were just all kind of this color here. Huh. That's interesting, Chris. Yeah, it's cool to hear your point of view on that. Yeah, different artists, different creatives have different strengths and weaknesses. This is I don't know if this is like inherently me, but the way that I 3D model is also sort of the way that I draw. I like kind of simple, reductive forms. I like streamlined things. I have a background as a graphic designer, and oftentimes graphic design involves reducing elements and making things simple. So yeah, I mean, you got to lean on your own personal style. You got to lean on your strengths to take you where you need to be. So that is all a good thing. It's interesting to hear your point of view on that. But don't be scared of abstract. Do some stuff that makes you scared. It'll be good in the long run. So that didn't have quite the impact that I wanted. We've still got some self-shadowing, which was weird. Maybe if I turn off scene by AO, I think that'll probably do it. We need a little bit more detail, so I'm adding like kind of some bases to some of these buildings. All right. Huh. Oh, there it is. Okay. I was looking at the wrong rendering. So it's looking now they kind of just look like bubbles, not like smoke at all. But we're not getting the shadowing there, so I think I can affect it a little bit easier, make it darker. Hmm. I wonder if those bases were the right move. Let's see. Oh, nice, cool. Yeah, 3D for Designers is a cool resource. She's been blasting a lot of really good work out on Instagram and stuff lately. She seems like a really swell gal too. You check out that she has this magazine she's putting out now. Primitive, I think it's called. Have you guys checked that out? I would recommend it. Maybe one day I'll get a dope feature. What do you think? With bases or without? Yeah, I think with. A little bit extra detail is nice. Kind of filling the scene out. I think this dude could use a base. There we go. That's an improvement. So I sweat the way every little thing overlaps. That's what I think creates a strong composition. All right, let's try this again. Render, 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 render. It's fun. Let's go back to the beginning and see where we started from, right? Started from the bottom, now we're here. Nighttime stuff, which does look pretty cool. Bubbles. And maybe some of these should have some different colors going on. Some of these chimneys. That one does, I guess. Let's break it up a little further. So that's looking more like smoke. Nice and simple. It's not doing too much to the composition. We are almost there. Starting to feel it. Getting pleased with where it's headed. Make sure everything's hitting hard and looking good. Oh, you like the bases? Cool. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it gives it a bit more like weight and depth, and also helps establish more like horizontal sort of movement or like a baseline kind of. All right, maybe one or two more test renderings. I'm going to knock out a slightly larger one, do some quick retouching, and that'll round out the episode. We're pushing the 2 hour mark here. As I like to joke, at 2 hours we turn into a pumpkin. Maybe I'll fire up Photoshop in the meantime. Yeah. All right. So I call this 2500. All right, final rendering. Huh. Called in sick today for a personal project. That's cool, man. Well, unless I'm your employer, in which case, bad boy. Good for you, man. I'd be curious to see what it looks like when you're done. Please fill us in. Maybe when you're ready, we could share it live on the show. Maybe next week or whenever it's finished up. Ah, got it. That's cool too, man. Hustling on the side. Get it in. Get it in. Still like to see it though, potentially if you're allowed to share it or whenever it launches, you know? I wonder if I should have added a third little doorway into one of these. Another thing I like to think about while I'm working is the number of things. And like odd numbers tend to work best in compositions, in my opinion. I've only got 2 doors. Typically, I do like 3 doors, but 3 doors down, right? Love that band. Not just kidding. Um, oh, that's cool. Branding stuff for a Twitch streamer. Cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. All right. I think we timed this one just about perfectly. By the time this finishes rendering, we'll do a quick retouch, which should only take a couple minutes, and we'll be killing it. We'll be done. The shadow looks a little weird. I'll live with it. A little bit of grain in the shadows here too, which we could adjust by bumping up some of the settings, but I think that's okay for now. It's funny. I have another, hearing what you're talking about, Chris. I've got a project that I finished up maybe a month or so ago, and it's not quite live yet, and I absolutely cannot wait to share it. It was a bit of character design work for a really cool technology company, that I hope in the next year or so will become a bit of a daily name, or a household name, I should say. And I'm really pleased and proud of how the piece came out, how the work in total came out. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. Can't say exactly when the company will launch the new brand, but when it does, I'll be spamming you with it. Cool. Another bit of criticism I have for myself is I've only got one yellow striped thing going on here. I guess that's a yellow strip, but maybe I should have worked in another yellow and beige striped element. But that's okay. Not gonna worry about it now. So practice. All right. Cool. Episode 52. Kind of crazy, huh? 52. Here's to another 52. All right, so I was getting these curves. Just some color balance. Blah. Just kidding. Look at that shit. Holy cow. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I'm just gonna dump that. Go to the vibrance instead. Try to keep it subtle. Try and do most of the work inside of cinema. Not that it matters really, but Yeah, sometimes really just like subtle updates in color can make a huge difference in the end product. And sometimes this helps too, right? And I always do that on a separate layer so then I can adjust it back down. So it makes my edges a little sharper and crunchier, but it also will increase the visibility of the graininess and the shadows. But that's okay. I'm going to duplicate this again. Yeah. So there we have it. Little bubble colony. Group of buildings, all hodgepodge together. Probably built in a desert in, over the course of 100 years. All the desert people slowly built their huts closer and closer to each other. And all of a sudden, we've got this amazing bubble colony. I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. I'm enjoying the use of these little pops of yellow. Yellow is not a color I'd always use a ton of in the past, but I'm enjoying it. It contrasts nicely with this blue sky, complementary color style. So it's been a ton of fun. It's been a ton of fun. Just like every week, this is really my passion and my pride, and I'm super pleased to be able to share it with you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you saw, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications, share it with a pal, tweet out about it, spread the word. As I mentioned earlier on in the show, we're like almost at that 1,000 subscriber mark. If we could push to hit 1K before next week, I would be eternally grateful and very happy that we're spreading the good word. I hope we're encouraging everyone watching to continue developing their own personal habits and their own creative practices, because it keeps you disciplined, it keeps you on the ball, and it keeps you creating good stuff. So thanks for tuning in. Till next time, we'll see you next week at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. This is Stuart saying goodbye. Thanks. See ya.